From marketing the show in a manipulative way, to ditching a beloved legacy cast member, overdosing on fan service, or even straight up sidelining the title character themselves. These shows all put one foot so obviously wrong. In some instances, it likely contributed to the show's swift cancellation, while others were at least still well received enough to get renewed for another season. Fingers crossed that those coming back for more will avoid the same mistake next season then. It's Open A. This is Whatculture, and here are TV shows that made one huge mistake: baiting fans with Daredevil Echo. The Marvel Cinematic Universe's Echo may ultimately have been far from the disaster that many expected pre-release, but it still rarely rose above acceptable mediocrity, and it didn't help that Disney set some unfair expectations right out of the gate. Echo's marketing heavily played up the presence of Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, as understandably led most to believe that he would have a relatively substantial supporting role in the series. Except Daredevil ends up appearing in just a single flashback scene in the show's very first episode, and, well, that's it. What? His screen time totals a whopping 98 seconds across Echo's roughly 3 hours. And so it's tough to blame fans for feeling duped. By hinging so much of the show's promotion on Daredevil, only for him to dip out after a cursory early cameo, Disney basically handed fans the cudgel to attack it with. Even if Echo was basically fine overall, it was fine. Disney were evidently compelled to manipulate fans like this after all the pre-release hand-wringing about the show's potential lack of quality, as well as the overall necessity of an Echo series in the first place. But it really only gave fans ammunition to dunk on the end result. And while on the subject of cameos, what's your favorite TV cameo of all time? You let me know in the comments section down below, baby.
Picking the worst character for a spin-off, Joey. Truly, a show that most people thought was too big to fail, how could a Friends spin-off starring one of its most beloved characters possibly hemorrhage most of its viewership by the start of its second season? The problem? Joey picked the worst character possible. Now, just to be clear, Joey Tribbiani is a great character in Friends, but literally the worst choice of all 6 main characters to lead their own show. Joey is by far the least able to thrive on his own, given both his status as the show's bona fide joke character, and how many of his finest moments in Friends were defined by his back and forth with Chandler. Every other Friends lead would have had an easier time fronting their own series, and while Joey wasn't at all helped by its mediocre writing, Mr. Tribbiani simply wasn't built to exist in his own ecosystem away from his pals. With its ratings firmly in the toilet by the end of season 2, NBC cancelled Joey, and the world largely forgot that it ever even happened.
Ditching the anthology format, Goosebumps. Goosebumps series had a ton of potential on paper to bring the hit horror franchise back to the small screen for a whole new generation. Except this new take on R.L. Stine's legendary series of horror novels ditched the anthology format popularized by the 1990s TV series. Instead, this rebooted take attempted to weave a number of classic Goosebumps novels into a continuous 10-episode series, featuring the same ensemble cast. A bold, if misguided approach which left many fans more frustrated than bowled over. You're really looking for the latter, aren't you? Tackling numerous iconic stories within the same narrative framework ended up feeling like more of a creative shackle than a bold remixing of what Goosebumps is. Basically, why tamper with a formula that's so damn perfect if it ain't broken all that?
No Nicolas Cage, National Treasure: Edge of History. A TV sequel to the much-loved Nicolas Cage starring National Treasure movies could have been an easy hit for Disney if it simply gave fans the one thing they needed for the show to succeed: Nick frickin' Cage! But Disney instead forged ahead with a soft reboot set within the same universe, focusing on a primarily new cast of characters, save for the brief appearances from Justin Bartha and Harvey Keitel from the movies. Between NAF reviews and an almost non-existent amount of social media interest in the series, it surprised nobody when Disney cancelled it after a single season. The reason for National Treasure's televisual failure? Say it loudly and say it proudly: no Cage, no sale. Given that Cage has been having quite the career renaissance in recent years, it's utterly baffling that the Mouse House didn't throw a fat payday his way for this, even if he only appeared in a supporting capacity for a few episodes. But let's be honest, the real thing every National Treasure fan wants isn't a series, it's a new movie starring Cage. Make it happen already!
No Niles, no sale, Frasier. Though the recent Frasier revival wasn't bad as such, it was massively hobbled from the outset by the absence of a character who helped make the original show what it was: Frasier's pathologically neurotic brother Niles. David Hyde Pierce opted not to return for the revival because he felt it didn't offer him much to do, and given that the razor-sharp dynamic between Frasier and Niles was the show, keeping one half of the Crane siblings off screen put it on the back foot before filming it even started. And that's no way to start, is it? And indeed, though the show tried to fill the void by introducing a bevy of new characters, including Niles' incredibly Niles-like son David, there's just no replicating the no-perfect magic of the Frasier-Niles two-hander. Niles was missed throughout the revival's first season, and while the show had its moments, it felt unmistakably lesser from start to finish.
Airing episodes out of sequence, Firefly. In the case of Joss Whedon's depressingly short-lived sci-fi western series Firefly, it wasn't the fault of Whedon or anyone else directly involved with the show's creation, but the pesky stuffed shirts at Fox. Rather than give the show a fair fight right out of the gate, Fox ill-advisedly aired 3 episodes out of order, ensuring that the intended pilot episode, Serenity, ultimately hit screens more than 3 months after the show's wonky launch. As a result, it's little surprise that Firefly felt disjointed and uneven to audiences, causing ratings to quickly tumble, prompting Fox to swiftly cancel the series and not even air the 3 remaining episodes in the US. The network couldn't have made it much clearer that they had little interest in nurturing Firefly's success, and so the fact that it still got a movie sequel, powered by nothing but fan enthusiasm, is nothing short of a miracle.
The brutal exposition dumps, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now let's be clear, Netflix's take on Avatar: The Last Airbender was streets ahead of the nightmare-inducing M. Night Shyamalan film adaptation, though it still had its fair share of flaws, and chief among them, that wonky dialogue. So much of Avatar's dialogue is comprised of exposition, and even accepting that a show of this fantastical nature needs to do plenty of audience onboarding, did the exposition dumps really need to be this blatant? It borders on self-parody at times, with how listlessly all the crucial information is word vomited at the viewer, with a few slightly wooden performances not helping matters either. Nothing makes otherwise interested people zone out like robotic reams of as you know dialogue, which in turn violates the most sacred of all storytelling rules: show, don't tell. In the very least, this massive flaw didn't turn audiences off enough to finish the show, as Netflix confirmed that it's already been renewed for 2 additional seasons. With so much of the groundwork now laid for audiences, hopefully season 2 might cool it with the snoozy lore dumps. Fingers crossed, eh?
Trying to be the next Lost, FlashForward. In the wake of J.J. Abrams' series Lost becoming a veritable pop culture phenomenon, there was a clear push by networks to hype up every tangentially themed sci-fi mystery series as the next Lost, and there was arguably no greater casualty of this than FlashForward. Also produced by ABC, FlashForward began airing shortly before Lost's final season commenced, and despite being based on a novel which predates Lost by 5 years, the network did everything they could to push it as a spiritual successor to Lost. Hell, it even had Lost alum Dominic Monaghan in it. Now, to be clear, this is less the fault of the show's creatives than ABC for aggressively marketing FlashForward this way, as putting it on a pedestal did it 0 favours at all. Was FlashForward an entertaining show? Absolutely. Was it a Lost caliber mystery? Well, no, not at all. And when viewed on its own terms, it didn't need to be. It also didn't help the series' declining ratings that ABC put it on a 3-month hiatus mid-season, which stalled its storytelling momentum and basically encouraged audiences to drop off. But the overall consensus being, it's pretty good, but it's not Lost, was something ABC set the show up for themselves, by selling it as the next big thing, rather than just letting it be its own beast.
Too much drama, not enough sci-fi. Constellation. Given Apple's incredibly strong track record with boundary-pushing sci-fi, it was easy to be optimistic about Constellation, a series in which an astronaut finds herself pulled between 2 different realities following an accident on board the International Space Station. Cool concept, right? The setup is also fantastic, and to a point, the show maintains a healthy amount of intrigue. Though after a few episodes, the balance between sci-fi and family drama begins to falter, with the latter taking disappointing precedence over the former. This may be a budget-motivated creative decision, but it's one that ultimately makes the season's 8 episodes a bit of a slog to sit through. For a show with such an ambitious high concept, to remain tethered to Earth as it sifts through prolonged, tedious human interest storytelling was a massive disappointment. General audiences seem to agree free too, as Apple cancelled the show shortly after it finished airing, presumably due to low viewership figures. Thanks for checking out this video today, you lovely soul, and if you're enjoying what you're watching, then hit that subscribe button down below for more Whatculture videos in your day.
Ditching the source material, Resident Evil. In an era where Hollywood is finally taking video games seriously, with quality recent TV shows based on The Last of Us and Fallout, its sheer refusal to deliver a source-faithful take on Resident Evil remains one of life's great mysteries. After Paul W.S. Anderson's not remotely reverent movie series concluded, and 2021's somewhat more faithful mishmash of the first two games failed to make a dent, there was hope that the IP might be better served by a TV series. But Netflix's Resident Evil instead saw showrunner Andrew Dabb take the series' name branding and use it to deliver his own distinct sci-fi horror show. Beyond borrowing some names, characters, and a few scattered ideas, the Resident Evil series was a nearly unrecognizable adaptation. Perhaps were it any good, it wouldn't have mattered so much, but save for a compelling performance from the late Lance Reddick as Albert Wesker, this was a hot mess. Amid poor ratings, Netflix cancelled it just 6 weeks after its premiere. The golden rule of adaptations: respect the source material, even if you make changes.
Making forced connections to the first season, True Detective Night Country. True Detective Night Country was certainly a divisive entry into the crime drama anthology series, but one thing most fans of the show can agree on: those ham-fisted references to the incredible first season were just awful. From appearances by the father of season 1 protagonist Rust Cole, to the presence of spiral symbols, mentions of Tuttle United, and most egregiously repeating the first season's iconic one-liner, "Time is a flat circle." It all stank of pandering fan service that has no place in True Detective, or anywhere really. It's surely rather telling that showrunner Issa Lopez originally pitched the show as a standalone thriller series, but it was HBO who suggested bringing it into the True Detective universe, at which point these corny Easter eggs were thrown into the mix. Ultimately, these moments simply came off as a clumsy attempt to sew Night Country into the fabric of the earlier seasons. Yet without any substance to the name-dropping and paraphrasing, it felt woefully desperate.
Having a massive budget, vinyl. A key component of any successful show is managing the scope and budget. That is, ensuring the cost makes sense relative to the show's prospective audience. And HBO well and truly whiffed that with their 2016 period drama series Vinyl, centered around the music scene in 1970s New York. Period fare is inherently expensive, and series co-creator Martin Scorsese doesn't come cheap either. But even so, the eye-wateringly colossal $100 million budget of Vinyl's single season placed its cost on par with the most expensive seasons of Game of Thrones. Obviously, the potential audience for a fantasy TV show adapted from beloved source material is far larger than that of a record industry drama, and even Thrones' first season viewing figures were regularly quadruple those of Vinyl's. Though HBO initially gave it an early second season renewal, they ultimately changed their mind once the season finished airing. And given the enormous resources poured into such meager returns, it's easy to appreciate why. With a more budget-conscious approach, though, the quality show could have made it to at least a second season.
Winston seems like a totally different character, the Continental. John Wick's spin-off series, The Continental, falls squarely into not bad, not great territory. It can't hold a candle to the movies, but as passable entertainment, it's basically fine. Except that is for the show's presentation of its protagonist, Winston Scott, who was of course played so brilliantly by Ian McShane in the John Wick movies. Even accepting that The Continental takes place decades before John Wick, this younger version of Winston, played by Colin Woodall, bears such little similarity to his film namesake that it's tough to reconcile they're even the same person. For starters, Winston speaks here with a distinct American accent, despite sporting a more English-skewing transatlantic twang in the John Wick films, which doesn't really make any sense at all. I mean, accents change when people move around for sure, but this much? Nah, not buying it. But beyond that, the gulf between the particulars of Woodall's performance, his mannerisms and tics, and McShane's is distractingly huge. Enough that it ultimately proves to be a massive distraction in a show centered entirely around this character, which is not what you want really, is it?
Reshooting most of it, The Idol. When HBO's drama series The Idol was cancelled, there was a chorus of "oh no." Anyway, Sam Levinson's provocative series about a pop star and her complicated relationship with a cult leader was largely panned for its writing and performances. It was little surprise though to anyone who'd been observing the show's rickety production history, given that the original director left the project after 80% of the show had been filmed. Reports indicated that this was due to concerns that her approach was too focused with the female perspective, at which point Levinson rewrote the series and reshot it from scratch. According to some who worked on The Idol, Levinson sought to focus more on the degrading love story and include more nudity and sex in the show than the original version did. While there's no guarantee that the original take on the material would have been leaps and bounds better, given that the filmmaking chops of that director and evident desire to explore the story from a more feminist skewing perspective, it likely would have been superior to Levinson's ultimately leering, ponderous version.
Having way too many episodes, death and other details. It was immediately clear from the marketing for Hulu's Death and Other Details that the murder mystery series was attempting to ride the coattails of Rian Johnson's Knives Out movies. And honestly, why the hell not? Who doesn't love a goofy whodunit in an exotic environment packed with quirky characters? Give me all of them. Except while Johnson's movies have concentrated this all into a tight 2-ish hours, Death and Other Details stretched its central mystery out into 10 episodes, clocking in at over 40 minutes apiece. The result is a show that feels like it's desperately spinning its wheels by the midpoint, bloating itself out with twisty, circuitous subplots before finally arriving at a big reveal long after most have likely lost interest. The show's story clearly only had the mileage for around a 6-episode miniseries, yet for whatever reason it went on for almost double that length. Couple this with Hulu's decision to release it weekly rather than all at once, which might have persuaded more folk to stick with it, and it's little surprise that the streamer cancelled it after just a single season. It's a shame, as with a tighter focus, this could have been a fun whodunit anthology series.
Rushing through the books, Shadow and Bone. Adapting any series of books into an ongoing TV show is incredibly challenging for many reasons, not least that there's no guarantee audiences will enjoy the show long enough to stick around for the long haul. Netflix's Shadow and Bone took a rather unique approach to try and ensure all the written material was adapted, by opting to basically speedrun the source material as fast as possible. The first season covered the original novel trilogy's first book, while season 2 slammed into overdrive and adapted the second and third books, Siege and Storm and Ruin and Rising, while also pulling in elements from the spin-off novel Crooked Kingdom. Season 2 ended up receiving a considerably more polarized response from fans of the books, who felt that the showrunners tried to cram far too much into it, resulting in a rushed mess which did little justice to the much-loved source. Amid middling viewing figures, Netflix consequently decided to cancel Shadow and Bone after 2 seasons, an outcome which most have blamed on how frantically the creators attempted to sprint through the novels,
making Knuckles a side character in his own show, Knuckles. Given the success of the 2 live-action Sonic the Hedgehog movies, a Knuckles-starring spin-off show should have been basically impossible to screw up, right? And while Knuckles certainly has its moments, it bafflingly decides to make the title character a backseat passenger in his own show. Across the first season's 6 half-hour episodes, Knuckles spends roughly half the runtime off-screen, with co-lead duties being doled out to Wade Whipple, the comic relief deputy sheriff who played a supporting role in the Sonic films. Knuckles ultimately ends up feeling as much Wade's story, if not more, with Knuckles ending up suspiciously hushed into off-screen subplots for bizarrely long stretches of time. One can assume this might have been a budgetary concern, due to both the visual effects costs and paying Idris Elba's voiceover fee. It's probably not cheap. In which case, why not just make Knuckles a collection of shorter 15-minute episodes that actually focus on, you know, him? Instead, he feels so lost in the shuffle that the show's title borders on false advertising. Boo!
Anthony Mackie's Miscasting, Altered Carbon. When it launched in 2018, sci-fi series Altered Carbon was Netflix's most expensive production to date, and despite the show's flaws, it was at least clear where all that money went. And while many fans complained that Season 2 noticeably scaled back the budget, resulting in its world feeling smaller and looking less dazzling, that isn't really the reason why it was cancelled shortly after its second season was released. The show's nature, whereby the protagonist can be played by numerous different actors inhabiting various sleeves, aka host bodies, means that original lead Joel Kinnaman was replaced at the start of Season 2 with Anthony Mackie. Mackie is a plenty likeable actor, but the big problem is that he never once felt like he was playing portraying the same character as Kinnaman. Kinnaman nailed the hard-boiled detective vibe in season 1, but Mackey's interpretation is so different that he basically feels like an entirely new person. And so the audience lost their connection to the protagonist, and general interest in the series dive-bombed, resulting in Netflix deciding it wasn't worth producing a 3rd season.
It's a prequel nobody asked for, Sexy Beast. Of all the acclaimed movies to produce prequel TV shows for, was anyone really clamoring to know more about what happened before Jonathan Glazer's 2000 cult classic crime comedy Sexy Beast? It's a terrific movie for sure, but was anyone dying to know more about the early lives of Gull and Don Logan? Enough to fill an 8-episode series at least? Probably not, right? Unsurprisingly, reviews patently reflected this, indicating a lack of inspiration for this prequel, which too often leans on the legacy of the film and invokes fan service far too readily. There's something to be said for movies just being movies, and the characters remaining confined within a mere 2-hour story, or in this film's case, a svelte 88 minutes, rather than being bloatedly expanded upon for the sake of development. This isn't to say that a Sexy Beast TV show couldn't have worked as a spiritual successor that focused on entirely new characters, but hopelessly tethered to its incredible forebear as it is, it's tough not to wonder what Paramount were really thinking by greenlighting this. Not everything needs a prequel, people.
Having a polarizing first episode, 3-body problem. While it might be a tad premature to deem it completely done and dusted, the future of Netflix's sci-fi series 3-Body Problem isn't looking great. Despite scoring positive reviews from critics, it netted a mediocre 11 million views in its first 4 days, placing it well below Avatar: The Last Airbender, and just a fraction above the cancelled likes of 1899 and Resident Evil. Furthermore, it failed to hit the #1 spot in its first week, instead sitting behind The Gentleman, which launched a whole 2 weeks prior. Its viewership has almost certainly been impacted by an incredibly polarizing first episode, which, with its vague introduction to the world of the acclaimed novel, surely caused many to bounce off almost immediately. It's little surprise that most mega-budget TV series play things relatively safe right out of the gate, and only dare to challenge the audience once they've already got their hooks in them. Admittedly, this is a tough strategy to pull off with source material as heady and dense as this, but given that the show didn't click for many until the 2nd or 3rd episode, it definitely would have made sense to make the onboarding opener a little less alienating.